So this is lesson 33 and it's intuition part 2. And in fact, it's the journey of intuition we're going to talk about today. So the journey of intuition. So we've had a first lesson already on intuition, haven't we? Part 1. We talked about loads of different aspects of intuition. We explained roughly what it was and different ways of gaining intuition. I'm just going to give you a little reminder in just a second. But roughly the outline for this lesson today is that we're going to talk about the journey of intuition. So slightly different to before. And the PowerPoint should probably last about 45 minutes, I should think, depending on discussion time. And then after that, we're going to do some more intuition exercises and explore a few various different methods of intuition. And I'm going to let Sally's comment guide us a little bit at the end there, because it'll be interesting to see what happens. So bear that discussion in mind at the end of this lesson, and we'll see what happens, see what our higher minds give us, or see what our Akashic intuition gives us. Okay, and then we'll see how long that takes, and if we get time to do some self-healing stuff at the end, then we'll see. All right then, so the journey of intuition. Let's have a quick summary of lesson 15, where we talked about intuition. Let's start with that. So we kind of defined intuition. We did talk about lower mind intuition, but we didn't spend much time on that because it's not as interesting as higher mind intuition. And so we defined it as an inner guidance from higher mind to lower mind. It's a type of communication, really, from the higher mind to the lower mind. And really, higher mind intuition only starts when the higher mind wakes up and it starts making life plans. So you remember that as part of the reincarnation lesson? The human journey of the soul starts where the soul is in a sleeping state, and then it wakes up and then starts to form life plans, and then starts sending intuition through to the lower mind. And it communicates through the major chakras. So we talked about that in the intuition lesson. We also talked about that in the anatomy lesson, where the 7 major pathways of intuition run through the 7 major chakras. And that can be quite often unconscious guidance. That can be guiding a lower mind through its life plan unconsciously. So the lower mind doesn't know that it's being guided. It's just being sort of pushed to one side, pushed to the other side, sort of guided by this intuitive process through the major chakras. Or it can be conscious. So we talked about the methods of making it conscious, about how to develop it consciously. Like, for example, using dowsing pendulums, or doing question and answers in your mind, or dreams. We talked about dreams as well. We also talked about the language of intuition and the metaphorical nature of that language. And if you remember, it was the universal trinity diagram was the language of that intuition, and it's a metaphorical language, which is why there's always these twists in intuition. You have to interpret intuition because of the metaphors in it. And we finished off with some practical exercises. So those were the assignments for that lesson. There was a question and answer. There was chakras exercise. There was a Kundalini exercise. Basically trying to see where people are at in the Kundalini journey, trying to see people's chakras and try and understand where the blockages are, because intuition is so important to network healers. By the way, this lesson is not going to have any assignment. We are going to do the exercises in this lesson. All right, so that was last lesson. Well, lesson 15 anyway, on intuition. But of course, this lesson is the journey of intuition. Emphasis on the word journey, of course. And what do we mean by that? Well, intuition changes over the course of spiritual evolution, and especially as you go into self-realization. It is a growing thing, and it is a changing thing. So what we mean by that is how it changes over time. So in this lesson, we're going to study intuition, how it changes over time, and especially as you go through Kundalini awakening and self-realization. So let's back right up to the start of the journey, and we might as well start at the sleeping higher mind. So the higher mind is asleep at this point, so it's reincarnating automatically and naturally, but there's no communication going on between the higher mind and the lower mind. So there is no higher mind intuition at that point. Now there's still intuition because there's lower mind intuition, isn't there? But it's nowhere on the same scale and level that the human higher mind is capable of doing when it wakes up. So then the higher mind wakes up. And what does that really mean exactly? Well, it wakes up to its own reincarnation and karma. That's a very important point. And it's the first thing really in the process of the higher mind waking up. The first thing that happens is that it realizes it's reincarnating. And it accesses its past life memories. And with it, its karma. Understanding what karma it has in the energy body. And then matching that karma with those past lives. Understanding that whole process. And at this point, it can start to form soul families and life plans because it starts communicating with other higher minds. So it naturally starts forming or joins soul families. And it starts making a life plan because it starts to understand what the point of life is. It starts to understand about self-realization. It starts to understand about the goal of life and where it's supposed to be getting to, the journey of evolution. So that's why it starts building life plans. Now it has some level of control, or it tries to have some level of control over where it's going in its life. Now that's a very gradual journey. So it has to start building the connections to the lower mind to keep it on its life plan, because the lower mind is in charge. At this point, the lower mind is in charge of the incarnation. As we grow into an incarnation, the lower mind and brain is carrying out that life, that incarnation. So the higher mind has to start building intuition connections into the lower mind to keep it on the life plan that soul has created before the life. So how does it do that? How does it calculate its life plan? Well, at this point, it is purely analysis and planning and calculating. So at this point, the higher mind doesn't know the future. It's just trying to make a life plan based on its own calculations. Now, this is a little bit like how the lower mind works in a way, if you think about it. How the lower mind and brain operates. It doesn't know the future. It analyzes and it strategizes. So, we all know how this works. At the start of your life, you start making plans, don't you? Oh, I want to do this with my life. I want to do this profession, or I want to have a family and have children, or I want to do this. Anyway, that's just a kind of a strategy, isn't it? That's a kind of a life plan. Well, the higher mind does the same, but on a much higher level. The higher mind is far more powerful in terms of its computing power. So it's capable of calculating out a life plan with all of the different choices ahead of us in the life plan. So, when you get to this point, I've got these many choices to take. If I take that choice, I've got these many choices at this point. If I took that choice, then I've got these many choices over there. Hundreds and thousands or even millions of different choices and things that could possibly happen. That the higher mind is capable of calculating that to a very high level. But still, this is not knowing the future. This is not knowing the future. This is trying to calculate what might happen and deciding what route it actually wants to take through that life. That's what it means to calculate your life plan. And how does it keep the lower mind on the life plan? Well, it has to build communication pathways between the higher mind and lower mind. And these are the 7 major chakra pathways. Now, we've done this a few times now, but just to remind you, through the crown chakra goes a sensation of knowing. So remember these as well for later on when we do these exercises. So a feeling of knowing comes through the crown chakra. Information comes through the brow chakra, and that information can take on many different forms, whether it's a vision, whether it's language, but that's information. So information plus knowing is already a very good guidance system. It's a knowing that something's the right way to go, plus a context. That's what that means. And then throat chakra is focus, the ability to focus on something. And the heart chakra is love, and the solar plexus is pleasure, and the sacral is enthusiasm, and the root is joy. So with those 7 characteristics, the higher mind pushes the lower mind into the way it wants to go, which is a form of guiding. And when it first starts out doing this, it's not that good at it. It takes a long time to grow. It takes a long time to be able to do this properly, which is why you sometimes see people out there in the world making pretty bad mistakes. And we talked about real mistakes versus false mistakes in the last lesson. So this grows over many, many incarnations. This ability grows over many, many incarnations. And that's what we want to focus on in this lesson. It's this growing of intuition. How does that work? That's what we need to study now if we want to study the journey of intuition. A lot of that was hopefully revision, because it's going over some of the stuff that we've gone through already in previous lessons. So let's study how it grows. And what we're talking about here is spiritual evolution, really. This is the journey of life and spiritual evolution. You know, spiritual evolution has many journeys within it, and intuition, growing intuition, is one of those journeys within it. And it becomes very important as you go through self-realization, because everything changes. So how does it grow exactly? How does it change over the course of however many incarnations, hundreds or even thousands maybe of incarnations? Well, to talk about that, we have to talk about the 9th chakra, because that is what actually makes it change. That's what grows the intuition. Now, we did touch on this a little bit in the last intuition lesson, but we're going to go into it in more detail now. So the 9th chakra, arguably the most important thing in the universe, maybe. The most important thing that exists in the universe of physical form, perhaps. So how does the 9th chakra grow? Well, as we know, the Kundalini system grows over time, doesn't it? And the 9th chakra is part of the Kundalini system. The 9th chakra is the top chakra of the Kundalini system, as you guys know. And this is what grows over time. So when a higher mind first becomes aware of its own reincarnation, it does loads of different things. Now, over the course of a growing period, it does lots of different things. I've mentioned quite a few already, like starting life plans, like forming soul families and soul contracts, and analyzing its own karma and making life plans and stuff like that. Well, another thing that it does is it starts growing the Kundalini system. The higher mind has to do this manually, let's say. It doesn't just grow automatically. The higher mind has to put its mind to it and start growing it. And it has to get the knowledge from other higher minds that this is what it has to do. And then it starts growing the Kundalini system. And first of all, the tracks are laid down. The framework of the whole Kundalini system is laid down to start with. That's one of the first things that happen. And the 9th chakra and the 8th chakra start to grow right from the beginning. But every time I say the Kundalini system grows through spiritual evolution, what that means is the central spinal channel and the bliss channels. So the main bulk of the Kundalini system grows over all that spiritual evolution and emotional lesson learning and spiritual development up through the chakras. That's the long period of time that it takes to grow. But the tracks, the framework goes in from the start. So the ninth chakra does start growing from the start. So what that means is that the ninth chakra actually does start to leak small amounts of akashic intuition right from the start, almost. Or another way of saying that is that the higher mind starts to download akashic intuition in tiny amounts right from the start. And it does that through what we call the akashic stream. Now, of course, we've talked about that lots already. So the ninth chakra is there, about 2 foot above your head. And the akashic stream is the channel from the ninth chakra down into the higher mind. And the akashic stream carries information or downloads. And one of those downloads is what we can call akashic intuition. Now, this is very, very important. What is akashic intuition at the end of the day? Let's define it a little bit. So what is it? It's knowledge. We can call it that. It's akashic knowledge directly from the source of the universe, because the ninth chakra is the connection to the source of the universe. But it contains various things like the future. Now, if you notice there, I've written that as future memories. The reason why I want to phrase it in that way is that akasha, that generates the whole of the universe of form, is completely deterministic. We've talked about that lots as well in the Universal Trinity lesson, for example. 100% deterministic or predetermined. It's set in stone. It's a set of information which is already written in a way for eternity, into the future, into the past. It's all written. So when the higher mind is able to download the future, it's exactly the same as a memory. So we usually use the word memories as things that have happened in the past. Well, actually, there are future memories as well. And it's exactly the same, really. The future and the past, in terms of in akasha, it's exactly the same. So that's why we're calling them future memories. And so then the higher mind can know the future. It doesn't have to calculate it anymore. Now that's very important, which we'll get to in a bit. Also, akashic knowledge. So the higher mind starts to download all the knowledge it needs to for whatever its future holds, or whatever its role is, whatever its life plan is. It gains all its knowledge from the ninth chakra. And some of that is akashic guidance. And akashic guidance is actually directions, but more than just directions in terms of that way or that way. It's more than that. It's actions. It guides the higher mind's actions. It takes control of the higher mind's actions. We'll talk more about that in a second as well. So this is a type of intuition from the source to the higher mind. So this isn't higher mind intuition that we talk about from higher mind to lower mind. This is from the source to higher mind. Completely different. So we could say that high mind intuition, i.e. the communication between higher mind and lower mind, comes from, at some point, it can come from akashic intuition plus calculated intuition. A mixture, quite often. And as we know, the ninth chakra and the Kundalini system grow over time. So you can actually express that as a percentage. How much akashic intuition versus how much calculated intuition. Remember, calculated intuition is the lower mind, is the higher mind trying to foresee the future and making calculations on what the choices could possibly be that come up. Whereas akashic intuition is knowing the actual future. So we can actually express that as a percentage. So let's start at the beginning when a higher mind starts calculating life plans, but it hasn't got a ninth chakra yet. The Kundalini system is not really started yet properly. So there's no ninth chakra. Let's call that 0% Akasha or 0% Akashic intuition. That would follow then that the life plans are 100% calculated. So let's wind on evolution now for quite some time. And at some point, the ninth chakra starts to appear. The Kundalini system is growing. The tracks have been laid down. So there is a ninth chakra there, but it's not activated because it's not sending anything down yet. It's not sending any intuition down yet. So still 0% Akashic intuition. And therefore 100% calculated life plans. Okay, let's wind it on even further now. Now this is winding it on a lot further. Now and I say that because this is a long journey. This is a long journey. So many lifetimes in between here of growing this thing. The ninth chakra is now connected. As you can see, there's a little sliver of Akashic stream that started there. And little bits of Akashic intuition start coming down from the ninth chakra into the higher mind. And let's call it, for sake of argument, to make it simple, 1%. 1% Akashic intuition, which means, of course, that the life plans are 99% calculated still. And now let's move it on even further through spiritual evolution. So now we're going right up to almost self-realization. This is where the ninth chakra is connected and it's developed further. And as you can see, the Akashic stream is widened out quite a lot there. There's a lot more Akashic intuition coming down. And we'll call this 10%, which means that the life plans are still 90% calculated. 10% knowing the future. Now, this is where most higher minds are in their last incarnation. So that 0% to 10% covers the whole of the spiritual evolution journey of the Kundalini system, which is a long time. So 10% is a lot when it comes to knowing the future. But then what happens? Well, that journey of spiritual evolution had a purpose. The Kundalini system growing over all those incarnations had a goal. And the goal, of course, is self-realization, because that's what the purpose of the Kundalini system is. It grows for the purpose of allowing that soul to become permanently self-realized. So that's what happens. A Kundalini awakening happens. When the Kundalini system is fully grown, it awakens. It's ready to awaken. And the vessels open up. The different sections of the Kundalini system open up. We've talked about that lots already, so you know the three different sections of the Kundalini system. They all open up and they start to act like vessels or channels for the ninth chakra. It allows stuff to come down from the ninth chakra and have an impact in the physical world of form. The source's physical world of form. That's how the source has a direct conscious impact in the world of form. Now we've talked lots about Kundalini awakening, so I'm going to skip on and talk about intuition, of course. So what happens during Kundalini awakening and the phases of self-realization to intuition? Because the journey of intuition is a massive part of self-realization. You know, everything's a journey, isn't it? I mean, spiritual evolution is a journey, and it's got lots of different journeys within it. Self-realization is another journey. It's still spiritual evolution, but it's just the start of another journey, and there's loads of journeys within it. And the journey of intuition is definitely one of them. So what happens as you go through a Kundalini awakening? Well, it opens up to 100%. That's what happens. And this actually happens just after the Kundalini phase. In the first, or sometimes second, no, I think in the first phase, most of the time in the first phase of self-realization. So just to remind you, the Kundalini phase finishes when K K1 and K3 mix together at the Bindu, go inside the Bindu, and then go into the lower mind and start the transformation process. And then the first phase of self-realization really starts. And part of that phase is that the intuition goes like that. The bandwidth, you could call it bandwidth. It just absolutely extends to its full amount, 100% Akashic intuition. And that's a completely, fully opened ninth chakra. Now, of course, that is going to the higher mind. So one thing to note here is that doesn't mean that the lower mind at that point suddenly just gets everything. It goes into the higher mind, and you're still going through a process here. So it's not that suddenly you just receive all the knowledge that you ever need in the lower mind. It goes into the higher mind. So 100% Akashic information or Akashic intuition, which means 0% calculated life plans. Very important that, because you might have had a life plan up to that point, but then you don't after that, or you certainly don't have a calculated one by the higher mind. And don't forget that there's other things that come down from the ninth chakra. So you get Akashic intuition. You also get unlimited golden energy. Don't forget that. It starts coming in from the ninth chakra instead of through the other chakras. And unconditional love starts pouring down from the ninth chakra as well, which gets funneled through the heart chakra, if you remember that. There is something else which I haven't put on this diagram, and that is Maya organ control, but we haven't talked about the Maya organ enough yet. So I don't want to open a can of worms. So we're going to talk about the Maya organ in a few lessons' time, don't worry. So 100% Akashic intuition from then on. Now that means quite a lot, and it changes everything, basically. So let's just have a quick look at the self-realization process. Now, we're not going to dwell on this whole self-realization process in this lesson, because it's not the topic really of the lesson. And, you know, what happens after self-realization is going to be mainly sort of PhD level, I think, after the degree. Or it might be third year degree course, I'm not sure yet. But it's not going to be part of this fast track, not in detail anyway. But having said that, we need to understand roughly what's going on during the self-realization process. And the first thing to understand is that higher mind and lower mind actually start to blend together, merge together. And that's what we call hybridization. They become a hybrid. So in this diagram, hopefully you can see the colors, the color differences there. There's the blue on the left-hand side and the grayish on the right-hand side. So higher mind and lower mind. They start coming together as one. Now this is called percolation, actually. This is the second phase of self-realization. We call it percolation because it's like the higher mind energy percolates into the lower mind energy. Or you could say it the other way around, that lower mind energy gets upgraded into higher mind energy. The frequencies, there are very different frequencies. Do you remember the lesson on anatomy where we talked about different frequencies of subtle energy, of magnetic fields, and the different frameworks of the body being on different frequencies, where the material body is the lowest frequency, then the lower mind, then the energy body, and then the higher mind at the highest frequency. So what happens in the hybridization process is that the lower mind gets upgraded into the higher mind frequency, so they become one. So move it along a little bit in the process, and you can see now that this diagram has got little bits of blue and little bits of grey dotted around everywhere. So really the lower mind and higher mind are assimilating together, or the lower mind is assimilating into the higher mind at this point. Now anatomically it's a fascinating process because lots of things get chucked out, some things grow, but you know, both the lower mind and higher mind are going through this process. So for example, the karma organs, they get chucked out. They're in the lower mind. You don't need them anymore. That's part of the transformation. No more karma processing organs. But also the higher mind changes as well. the cognition circuits of the higher mind changes. They're not needed anymore. So there's no more thinking in the higher mind at all, because it doesn't need it anymore. There's no more calculated life plans. It doesn't need to think anymore. All it needs to do is process the information coming down from the ninth chakra. Another thing that grows is the Maya organ. The Maya organ is an updated energy programming organ. We'll talk about that later on. But basically, there's a whole transformation process going on here. Now, as part of this phase, the lower mind has to surrender. This is the difficult bit. This is the bit that we all struggle with. And there's no choice, obviously. We have to go through it. We are going through it. There's no choice but to surrender. But it's difficult along the way. And having awareness of what's going on is very important. But it's not just one moment of surrender. You have to keep surrendering. You surrender again and again. And you keep surrendering more. And when you think that you've surrendered everything, you surrender some more. And even then, there's just a little bit more. So that phase, that hybridization process is the lower mind surrendering itself. And that is the false identity that really what we're talking about here. And this is how the lower mind disappears eventually. The lower mind identity disappears. Yes, so what we're talking about here in this process, this is over the course of around 7 years. Now, I will just add there that what we're seeing is a new type of self-realization that's happening at the moment in the last sort of decade or so, I would say. And what we're seeing is that self-realization is changing, and it's to do with the global awakening. Self-realization itself is evolving, and it's being shortened down. So basically, all the stuff that used to happen before over a long period of time has been crammed down to a very short process. That is why it is so painful. It's all happening at once. So before, in what we call the old type of self-realization, or the traditional type, and we know this because my mum actually started her self-realization process in the old system, in the traditional type of self-realization, and you can see it everywhere. Anyone else that's going through it, you can see it. You can see what's going on, and it's been written about for thousands of years. So it's easy to see the difference now with the new type. And what used to happen with the old type is that people used to do most of this hybridization process after their last incarnation. So they used to have their incarnation, they used to have a Kundalini awakening, go through the Kundalini awakening phase. And when all the karma was finished, that was the end of that incarnation. And then they took another 1,000 years or whatever to go through the phases of self-realization. Whereas now, what we're seeing is it's crammed into a short period of time. And that's why the surrendering process is so painful in this new type of process. So are you kind of referring to these sort of ideas that fly around of the 144 and the ascension process, and some people will ascend and some people get left behind? Is that what you mean? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of myths that spring up from grains of truth, as ever, isn't there? And so I think it's a bit of a misunderstanding. And and there's a lot, I also see a lot of stuff online where people are just getting the wrong impression of what's actually happening. And that's normal, though. That's normal for the lower mind. It tends to misunderstand things quite a lot. And the grains of truth is that the global awakening is about to happen. It's kind of just in its infancy, but it's about to happen. And not everybody on the planet is going to become self-realized at once. That's the difference. That's what the people are picking up on. So there is a still going to be, compared to 8 billion people on the planet, it's still a tiny amount, really, and it's going to grow every year. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, or even thousands more people becoming self-realized every year from now on, but that's still a tiny amount compared to 8 billion. So it's like an exponential growth curve like that. But the thing is, And also, everybody will get to self-realization, of course, because every soul is on that journey, and people will become self-realized when they're ready. So the global awakening takes a long, long, long time, and it grows very gradually. So the problem is that people get hold of this idea, and myths spring from it, and the ego gets hold of it and starts saying things like, "Oh, there's a chosen few." There's a chosen number of people on the planet that are going to become self-realized and then leave everybody behind and sit at a higher frequency, and everyone else is going to be left behind in the mud. And that's absolute nonsense. And it's things, religious ideas spring from that as well, like the rapture. Have you heard of the Christian rapture? It just expands. The lower mind imagines all sorts of stuff, and it expands into stuff that just isn't true. That's what I would say. Yeah, well, again, there's misunderstandings. There's complete misunderstandings of what surrender really is. So surrender, and this is what happens. These concepts come out through intuition, but then people get hold of them throughout the ages, and ego grabs hold of it and twists it into something else, or misinterprets it in some way, because it's difficult to understand. But the possessions and things, or giving up your family and things like that, that's a literal interpretation of the concept. But really, it's not about giving up anything in your material life at all. It's about giving up the resistance in here to what happens. So you can have the richest person or the wealthiest person on the planet. Well, no, let's stay away from that, because that's got some connotations. You can have one of the wealthiest people on the planet could be in the highest state of surrender, and you could have the poorest person on the planet in the lowest state of surrender. It really has no relevance to what you actually have. It's all about what you're attached to as well. So you could have lots of things but not be attached to any of them, and your identity could be not identified with having those things. Or you could have not much at all. You could have just one or two things, possessions, and be so attached to them that that's your part of your identity. So it's easy to misinterpret, though, isn't it? Definitely. Okay, so lots of surrendering. That's where we're at. And really, it's the lower mind that has to surrender its identity and everything in it. So you go through this process of just letting go of everything, bit by bit. Everything, all our attachments, all our desires, anything, any resistance to things that happen to us in our life, all that is surrendered. So the next stage is when the higher mind and lower mind are fully integrated or hybridized. And at this point, there is no higher mind or lower mind, you could say. And we do have a name for that. That is a Deyavatara. Now, an avatar is a word that's already been used for thousands of years for this type of thing, for a self-realized being. Now, there's different versions of it in different religions and spiritual traditions, but technically speaking, an avatar is used to describe a self-realized being, because the word is a Sanskrit word, and it comes from, the meaning is descent. And what that really means is descent from the source into physical being, or into the world of form. Now, we've put the word Deh, D-E-H, in front of that to describe a person going through self-realization at the time of a global awakening. So that's why we're calling it Deyavatara. That's our word that we've created, because you can create new words with Sanskrit. So it's using the well-known word avatara and then creating a new word, Deyavatara. Anyway, so that is the new hybrid mind. Now, if there is no more higher mind and lower mind, back to the subject of the lesson, well, that means, of course, there's no intuition, or there's no higher mind intuition. There's no more communication from higher mind to lower mind. And by the way, this is another symbol of duality, the duality of the higher mind and lower mind coming together in unity. So how does that affect intuition, or what happens to intuition after that? Because this is a major change. You know, there's been high mind to low mind communication for thousands of years in that journey of that soul through spiritual evolution. But it changes completely now because there is no more of that at all. So Akashic intuition is the only thing that is left now. And this is just a representation of the Source's infinite Akashic plan, which is being downloaded through the ninth chakra into that day avatar. Now, of course, it doesn't look like that because it doesn't look like anything. It's non-physical. Akasha is non-physical. So you can't see it, you can't visualize it, you can't draw it. But we have to put something down on paper, don't we? So that's our representation of it. So that gets downloaded directly into the day avatar. So what does that feel like when you're going through that change? Well, if there was a question and answer before, that changes. There is no more question and answer. So in the last lesson, we talked about how to use intuition, and we talked about asking a question, getting an answer, sometimes using an easy yes or no answer, for example, to get intuition, conscious intuition. Or even if it's unconscious intuition, to be honest, that still applies. You know, if you've never gone into that side of things and never talked to your high mind in that way, and it's just been unconscious intuition, and it's exactly the same. It makes no difference. There's just no more analysis then. There's no more decision making. So question and answer disappears. And that becomes just pure intuitive action or intuitive knowledge. So the knowledge just comes to you. There's no more question and answer. It's no more lower mind asking higher mind something for some knowledge. And in most people, in every person also, there is intuitive action. Once you pass the Kundalini phase, all your actions become aligned with the Source infinite plan. That's what intuitive action is, or Akashic intuitive action. All your actions are directly coming from the ninth chakra at that point. Now, it takes a fair bit of trust to actually take that on board, because what that actually means is that nothing can go wrong. Nothing that you do can be wrong. Nothing that you say can be wrong. Now, I don't mean factually correct or incorrect there. That's a different concept. But nothing that you do or say or act can be the wrong thing to do. But it takes a lot of trust to actually believe that or take it on board. And that's why that's another journey in self-realization, the journey of trust. Trust builds gradually as surrender builds as well. As the identity disappears off like that, then surrender is increasing and trust is increasing at the same rate. But you know what that means, right? If you start to understand that nothing can go wrong and it's all planned for you, there's certainly no need to worry about anything anymore. And you just do things when you are guided to through your intuition. Oh, I've got to go and do that now. I'll go and do it. Once you're finished, nothing. You don't have to worry about what you're doing next week or next year, or worry about the future or anything, because you know it's all organized already in the Akashic plan. Ah, yes, absolutely. Let's stop for a break. Go for it. See you in a couple of minutes, a few minutes. Right, how are we doing? Should we crack on? Right then. So we're talking about the journey of trust. Means nothing can go wrong. And let's not forget, though, that the lower mind's definition of what is wrong or right is not what we're talking about here. So we have to get with the program of the Akashic plan. We have to get with the higher mind program and understand that whatever happens to us is designed. It's supposed to be. It can't go wrong. And once you finish the hybridization process, there's no more resistance. There's no more resistance in the mind. There's no more thoughts, lower mind thoughts going, oh, this shouldn't happen, or I want this to change, or I want this to happen, or whatever. You know, the resistance to what happens to you, the resistance to what is, disappears completely because there is no more lower mind. There is no more lower mind identity. And because of that, hurdles are then removed from your path, because hurdles in the way were only there for a purpose. They were only there originally to burn karma away. And through the self-realization process, hurdles are just there to trigger you, to trigger that resistance, because it's wearing down the identity through the first cycle of self-realization, the negative cycle. So once there's no more identity, there's no more resistance, and hurdles are completely removed as part of the infinite plan of the source. And another thing to note about this is that free will becomes an illusion. Or more precisely, you realize that free will was always an illusion, ultimately. Because free will is all about making choices, isn't it? And when there was higher mind to lower mind communication, the higher mind would try and influence the choice that the lower mind identity would be making. But if there's no more lower mind identity, there is no more choices to be made. You are just acting out the instructions from the source, from the ninth chakra. You just become part of that plan. Therefore, that's the same thing as saying there's no free will, because it's already planned out. And just a quick reminder, finally, before we do some exercises, quick reminder about the language. This is the self-realized universe, the universal trinity. So intuition, the language of intuition before self-realization was the old version, which I haven't got in this lesson, with lots of red and black, lots of positive and negative. This is the self-realized version. And this is the language, this diagram wrapped up in a language, imagine it as a language. That's the language of Akashic intuition that comes through from the ninth chakra after the Kundalini awakening, through self-realization. And that is the universal trinity without the suffering. The old diagram, if you remember from the universal trinity lesson, the other diagram is a diagram of the source of the universe in a state of suffering. And then after awakening to itself, the language changes, it becomes self-realized, and suffering ends. And this is another reason why after self-realization, the barriers and the hurdles get removed, because there's no more need for them anymore. The source of the universe awakens from its suffering which drives it to awakening, and then it exists in a self-realized state. This is the language of the Akashic intuition that comes down from the source. There's no need to try and figure out how it works in a language, for the moment is no need. It's just try and imagine that diagram, the cycles of that diagram can be used as a language. Okay, now let's talk about some intuition exercises, or let's do some intuition exercises. So in the last lesson, we had an assignment set, and we had things like trying to visualize somebody's chakras and their blockages, trying to visualize where somebody's Kundalini system or growth has got to, trying to see somebody's karma levels in the energy body. So in this lesson, we're just going to change it slightly, and we're going to do a different exercise, but still trying to develop that Akashic intuition. Now, the first thing to mention here before we do these is the tap on, tap off concept. And what this really means is, and this is kind of going back to the start of this lesson, Sally, where you brought up the different way of having intuition, knowing instead of seeing, for example. But you're quite capable of seeing things, obviously, because you just mentioned about SpongeBob. So this is about the tap. So this is why this is all being brought up. This is about the tap, on or off. The eighth chakra is a tap. and the Akashic stream has control of that tap, and sometimes it gets turned on and sometimes it gets turned off. And I don't mean completely, I mean selectively. It can select what it turns on and off, but sometimes you've just got no intuition. You'll just draw a complete blank and you don't know why, and that's when your tap's been turned off. You know, you've probably seen it happen to me in mid there it goes. In mid yes, presentation or whatever. So sometimes mid sentence. Exactly. And you just have to get used to it. It used to do it to trigger me, actually, but now whenever it happens, it's usually to make a point about something. And this can happen with all forms of intuition. So sometimes you might draw a blank, and you know, some of you may even you know, the process of gleaning intuition through the process of self-realization doesn't happen the same for everyone as well. That tap sometimes doesn't open in somebody till a certain point, or some people's tap gets opened, you know, really early. It really just does depend on the process, but everyone eventually will have all of those forms of intuition because there's no reason not to. So I want to mention that in case you try some of these exercises sometimes, and if it doesn't work, you might think, oh, well, I can't do that. But that's not true. That is not the case. You can do it, or your high mind can do it. It's deciding to not turn the tap on for whatever reason. And quite often it has to do with triggering. in that negative cycle of self-realization, the triggering process is paramount, isn't it? Because it's wearing down that false identity. So quite often it will be very selective with what it gives you. That's the point I want to make, basically. So the exercise, we are calling it intuitive research. And basically what I want to do here is get you guys to start looking for answers, looking for knowledge. So in the last exercise, in the last intuition lesson, we were talking about trying to see or know or get knowledge from a healing partner, where their blockages are, where their karma is, what karma is they've got, and you know, that sort of stuff. Because we use that in network healers all the time as part of the healing journey that we offer to people. But this is slightly different. We use this in network healers as well, and we are planning to use it more and more in network healers. Intuitive research. That means getting knowledge from the Akashic stream. So what we thought we would do is we'd go through these again, but do it slightly differently. And this time we want to bring up a picture or an image of certain things in the energy body and try and zoom into them and see what the anatomy looks like. And this is the process that I've been using for quite a lot of this course, for example. And, you know, we want to build on that, and network healers will need to be practicing this all the time, and our knowledge base will grow and grow and grow. And we'll have somebody that attends, by the way, just as an aside here, we'll have somebody who attends healing hubs, and I think is going to be doing this to start with. So attending healing hubs and then transferring the knowledge, the new knowledge, to the education system. So whatever new stuff comes out along the way, we've got a way of bringing it over into the education department. So let's start with the 9th chakra. So everybody give this a go, and don't necessarily expect anything, and don't necessarily have any expectations of what you might be given. Answers can come in various forms, as brought up at the start of the lesson. Whether it's a knowing of something or whether it's a seeing of something, doesn't really matter. Might even be a hearing of something or a feeling of something. Or it may be just a twinkle of something which you've then got to tease out. Or sometimes you even get like a metaphor of some kind. You see a picture of something and at the start it doesn't make sense, but then You've got to tease it out. You've got to tease the meaning out, and it might send you on a little journey of finding the information. So there's all sorts of ways that this can actually happen. Okay, any questions so far before we try the exercise? Yeah, so that's the key difference here from last time. We are not seeing it on anybody. We are asking for knowledge. We are asking for knowledge about a particular thing. So we're going to start with the ninth chakra because it's such a big part of this lesson. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and receive a vision of the ninth chakra. And then I want everybody to zoom in, to learn how to zoom in to that vision to see what's inside the ninth chakra. So that's the purpose here. I want to see what's inside the ninth chakra. Now we might see it all in different ways. That's perfectly fine. Some of us might not see anything at all. That's perfectly fine. Remember the tap on and off thing? So we're going to close our eyes for, 5 minutes or so. A bit like the Vinaya visions that we were doing. But this time we want to, you set your intention that you want to see the ninth chakra, and then you try and zoom in. Think of, the zooming in bit. Think of it like zooming in on a phone. When you do the little finger and thumb thing where you zoom in, well, try and do that in your mind and see closer and closer, and then try and go inside the ninth chakra and let's see what's in there. Okay, everyone ready to go? Okay, go for it. Okay, that'll do. Let's start coming back. Try and keep that vision that you've got, if you've got a vision. Try and keep it at the same place so that you can go back to it whenever you want. Okay, how is that? Who would like to volunteer anything? Anyone see anything interesting? Yeah, go for it. Excellent. When you say cone, do you mean you're talking about the ninth chakra is a cone-shaped thing in your vision, like a traffic cone? All right, excellent. Love it. So let's ask to see anyone else's visions, because they could be wild. It's perfectly all right to be wildly different, by the way. So don't forget what I said about interpreting some of these visions sometimes, and different metaphorical meanings sometimes, and sometimes direct meanings. But anyone else got anything? Excellent. So I think what we'll do is we'll come back to them all, and we'll then compare them and find the bits that are pointing to what is in the ninth chakra. So that's excellent. We'll come back to that. Anyone else? Excellent. Yeah, I can see the similarities, which we'll get back to. Anyone else? I think you yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I also recognise some of that. Okay, anyone else? Yeah, no, they're very good, and they're very different, which illustrates how Akashic intuition can work sometimes. Anybody else want to share anything, or are we about there? Right. Okay. I wonder. Next time you try that, I wonder if you want to zoom out. Ask to zoom out, because that might be an answer in itself when you say don't see anything. It might be the tap off thing. That might be a thing that your higher mind is restricting it. Or you could be seeing right in the center of the ninth chakra, because the center of the ninth chakra is non-physical and there's nothing there. So that might be your answer. Not all of it. No. So... And well, before I carry on, has anyone got anything else to add? Excellent. Well, remember the word you use, DNA. Remember that. It's very important. Okay, we'll come back to that. Anyone else? Okay, so let me try and just describe what's in there in words, and then we can apply those visions to the description. So the ninth chakra, right inside the very center of the ninth chakra, there is non-physical space. Non-physical reality. That's the source. So yeah, it's very difficult to wrap your head around this, because ultimately that is nowhere and everywhere. But it's also located in the center of the ninth chakra. But things are being generated from that space, from nothing. And there are consecutive layers outside that center space. And inside, sorry, let me carry on. First, inside the non-physical reality, Akasha is being generated. Now I call it the Akashic spinal column. There is a spinal column inside there, which is very much like a DNA strand. And it's it's coded information. And that's all non-physical, so it's difficult to really get your head around because it hasn't got form. But that's what acacia is. It's non-physical information, and so there is a stream or a flow of that information in that central non-physical space, and then it gets to the outside of that initial space, and then it gets manifested into energy. And then it goes through these different layers. It goes through these different layers of manifestation. And this is where you saw shades of golden and orange and yellowish, because that's the color of energy. And that's where acacia becomes actual energy, which is form or programmed energy. And then there's these filaments, there's these weird filaments that go from layer to layer as it comes out of the center. And then eventually it all gets funneled down into the central spinal channel and then downwards towards the eighth chakra. So there's all your descriptions are a description of what's going on in there. Some people saw filaments moving. Some people saw information, code, DNA. It's very much like a DNA strand. In fact, I think that concept of a DNA strand is replicated throughout the universe in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. And it's like a bit like sacred geometry patterns get replicated throughout the universe. Well, I think the DNA strand, the concept of the DNA strand, also does that. Yeah, and there was loads. Pretty much everything everyone said could be related to actually what's going on in there. Someone mentioned blue, color blue. I wonder if that has a reference to unconditional love that's coming out. The bubbles, I think, maybe a different way of seeing the filaments. Quite a few people had different layers of some kind. What else was there? Anyone else recognize something in their vision? Well, there's loads of stuff in there, isn't there? The satellite dish is is picking up the source infinite akashic plan and funneling it through as information. And then the golden bit is the bit where non-physical becomes physical or manifested form. The purple and the white, that's interesting. I don't know, is that maybe relating for some reason to the non-physical information that's being generated there? I don't know. Something to investigate. Okay, yeah. And quite often when you press the button, do you also get bubbles that rise up in the water? So this is it. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is akashic knowledge. So let me just stop showing that. I think we probably will leave it at that one. I mean, I put the others in there, chakra, karma, kundalini, just as an example that you can go away and practice and see all sorts of bits and pieces that you want to see. But I think we've got pretty much what we needed to get out of that. And that's giving you a good example of how to channel akashic intuition. And then at the end of the day, sometimes it doesn't matter really what the actual image that you're seeing, inside the ninth chakra, really. Do we really need to know what it actually looks like? Perhaps it doesn't actually look like anything because it's impossible to see it. It's impossible to see it at that sort of level. Really, all we need to know is the knowledge of how it works and what's going on inside there, isn't it? So you can be shown that in many different ways. So that intuitive connection is something to nurture, because we use that a lot in network healers, don't we? We use it to see or know or understand people's chakras and their blockages, to see where their karma is. We're going to be talking more about karma in a couple of lessons time, and trying to see where people's karma is so that we can target it to get rid of it. Seeing where somebody's kundalini growth is essential sometimes to know what type of help we can give somebody. And gaining knowledge, what we've done in this lesson, gaining intuitive knowledge about energy anatomy and other things. All right, lovely. Should we call it a day then? Lovely. Good job. Yep. See you next week.